Watch Dogs. If you were to utter those words between the years of 2012 to 2014, you would have been a part of a large group of gamers eagerly anticipating this breakout new title. Some called it the futuristic Grand Theft Auto, crossing a free roam open world game with an edgy cybercrime drama.
Give me a name.
They never gave me a name!
Yeah, I'll tell your name.
The Watch Dogs reveal looked incredible and appeared to be way ahead of its time. The detail shown was extremely next-gen. From the realistic rain, the shadow work, the ambient volumetric fog, to the small things like the way Aiden's coat moves so realistically, it's phenomenal. And to think it was all a backdrop for a nail-biting revenge story with cutting-edge, competitive multiplayer. If you could ever dream up a title that would get the industry standing on its toes giddy with anticipation, it would have been Watch Dogs. It's been 5 years since the day Watch Dogs launched. A lot has happened in that time, including a sequel and the first gameplay reveal for the third game in the franchise. Ironically, for a lot of people, Watch Dogs died a quick and painful death on May 27, 2014, as it came under fire for being one of the most overhyped and deceptive video game practices in history. Immediate criticism was thrown its way for the blatant discrepancy between the pre-release footage shown and the actual game. This got taken to an extreme for console users. Why did the graphics look so dated and washed out? So much detail seemed to be missing. Why was the hacking gameplay that promised to be radically groundbreaking so underutilized? A predictable story that could have been written much better and taken itself much less seriously, missions that were incredibly boring, and a main lead that would have been at home starring in a game called Aiden, the most unlikable video game character ever. Nobody knows why Watch Dogs turned out so average, but considering the immense hype surrounding the game, it pushed the bar of expectations far out of reach for the final product. The technical blundering was most likely due to Watch Dogs being created for 6 systems: the PC, Xbox One, PS4, and even the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3, consoles that were already on the way out. This created an immense pressure to tone down the game to its lowest common denominator, forcing the developers to cut back and trim down the running quality of the title. After all, the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One had only been on the block for 6 months when Watch Dogs came out, so it was important for Sony and Microsoft to negotiate developments for their older systems to squeeze the last drops of money out of them before the new generation would be self-exclusive. Unfortunately for Ubisoft, many files containing advanced graphical and performance options were found in the PC version following its release, showing that the developers did want to push the limits of their new game, but either couldn't optimize with the steady frame rates or scaled them back so that there wasn't a grand disparity between each version. Ultimately, it backfired on them either way, and the industry felt the cold-blooded sting of betrayal from Ubisoft with the downgrade. There are few things worse than experiencing a technical downgrade such as this, but it's another to discover a game that was so heavily anticipated isn't all that great, but just okay. Watch Dogs isn't the worst game in the world, but you could easily throw it into the bin with the industry's 6.5 out of 10s pretty easily. Watch Dogs was a competent, though cobbled together open world game with below average controls, decent presentation, and acceptable gunplay. Everywhere you turned, it was a mix of hot and cold though. The dark and gritty vibe is attractive, but the lack of detail made it feel uninteresting. Some of the missions are pretty good, yet the overall story leaves a lot to be desired. You can have fun driving around Chicago, living out the fantasy of a hacker in the open world, but the game also gets bogged down by extremely repetitive side missions. Along the way, you'd be hard-pressed not to run into some pretty drab visuals, lots of pop-in and invisible walls, a bad collection of minigames, fairly poor AI, and some of the worst vehicle handling in the history of this genre, i.e. cars that feel like they're driving through mud half the time. And the fact that you can't shoot while cruising around made it really off-putting, and that's pretty bad for a game like this. So while Watch Dogs had a few redeeming qualities to it, it was also filled with missed opportunities and questionable game design choices at the same time, most notably its story, which takes over 6 hours to finally start heating up. When the smoke clears, it's sadly a discount game, very ironic for one of the most hyped, forward-thinking games of all time. Though the reception for Watch Dogs was mixed and average, the game sold incredibly well, and it was Ubisoft's fastest selling game of all time when it released. It just goes to show you the power of marketing and the pre-release hype train of bringing a brand new AAA groundbreaking quote-unquote title to the market. So why, after Watch Dogs was exposed for its mediocrity, is the franchise starting to become one of the more exciting catalogs? Well, first, it was because Ubisoft provided a really nice sequel. The great irony of Watch Dogs 2 is that it exceeded expectations, though sold much more poor than the original game. This was obviously due to the mismanagement of the original title. Gamers were cautious, especially in 2016 when Ubisoft was still looked at as a carbon copy publisher, which would change tremendously in the next 2 years when the company delivered high-quality Assassin's Creed games, rehauled Rainbow Six Siege, and began to pursue the development of strong independent titles like Child of Light. To this day, with other great games like The Division 2 under its belt, Ubisoft is considered a publisher that has made one of the biggest turnarounds. And for the most part, that same thing happened to Watch Dogs with its follow-up in 2016. Watch Dogs 2 delivered a much more casually toned game with a great story and cast, more interesting gadgets to play with, better controls, although not perfect, and a refined camera view that made navigation easier. Watch Dogs 2 also found some much needed humor with its new millennial hipster cast, providing some fun social commentary in and out of gameplay. I put 30 hours into Watch Dogs 2 and I found it pretty engaging all the way to the end. You play as Marcus Holloway, who eventually joins up with DedSec, a group of anonymous hackers looking to fight against corporations and sometimes the government, and stop them from using personal information of citizens for their own gains. It's set in San Francisco this time around, allowing Watch Dogs 2 to get much more closer to the ground while exploring these elements of personal privacy, cybercrime, and the influence of capitalism on technology. After all, Silicon Valley is the home of technology. And Marcus's growing need to expose these injustices is a great reason to get involved because we can all relate. So while Chicago was gray and drab, Silicon Valley is vibrant and inviting. And for the most part, it does a better job setting up interesting scenarios than the first game and has better side quests too. From taking down corrupted cops, hacking into buildings to erase criminal data, to invading a mega corporation's campus, there's a lot on offer, and the game utilizes its hacking elements a lot more than the first game, which is one of the downfalls of the original title. It doesn't ever surpass the greatness of many Grand Theft Auto games, but it was most definitely a huge step up from the original Watch Dogs. Certain things could have been better, but for the most part, a pretty successful follow-up. Best of all, no pre-release deception this time around, better post-launch support, less bugs, and simply a better game as well. Redemption is often hard to come by in today's industry. If you mess up once, gamers sometimes won't give you a second chance. After all, there are many great games that these people could have otherwise spent their money on. There's also something to say about doing the best you can do with a new gameplay concept, yet not going overboard with the frenzy of yearly iterations. Ubisoft set out to create a cybercrime hacky version of GTA that also mimicked the presentation, structure, side content, and minigame options, as well as the length that it offered. And after the first one just didn't work, it allowed a 2-year window for the improvements to be made and for a new game to be developed. Many publishers would have run the franchise into the fucking ground by copy-pasting the templates onto the next game within 365 days with a new city. So kudos for Ubisoft for not making this a yearly franchise, and again, to see something very different with Watch Dogs Legion the next game. For those who didn't see the gameplay trailer at E3, Legion is looking to be one of the more exciting video games releasing in the spring of 2020, and it's not going down that old familiar road of, well, familiarity. Legion is going to be set in London and will feature the ability to control any character in the game. Let that sink in for a second. Surprisingly, every one of them will be fully voice acted and featured in the game's various cutscenes. How they plan to do this is beyond me, but the concept itself says that Ubisoft wants to take Watch Dogs into uncharted waters. Unfortunately, Ubisoft has a trend of over-promising and sometimes under-delivering, mostly due to unrealistic ambition. Whether it's the connectivity of Siege, the mechanics of For Honor that needed to be retooled, the Division's lofty promises that under-delivered, or the seamless multiplayer of Watch Dogs 2 that was broken at launch, Ubisoft tends to take on more than it can chew. It's only later do they fix, patch in, or replace these types of errors, so if the core gameplay mechanic of Legion, which is also the selling point by the way, isn't in tip-top shape when the game launches, they will have a problem. Even if the implementation is a success though, the danger of having multiple characters is that although players might have more touch points to connect to, those hundreds of NPCs may not be fleshed out as well as they could be, resulting in thin character development and presentation. This could ironically create less to grab onto if the game focused instead on a single controllable protagonist. GTA 5 was able to stretch this character option to 3, providing separate story beats and experiences depending on whether controlling Trevor, Michael, or Franklin. Perhaps this was the sweet spot between setting up character choice and character development, but we'll soon find out with Legion. Watch Dogs is a franchise that started at the bottom and climbed up with a great sequel, and from the look of it, quite possibly another. Comebacks are hard to find in gaming, and with Rainbow Six Siege and For Honor getting better every day, Ubisoft stands above EA currently as a company that seems to have learned from their mistakes. If Legion can make good on its promises, perhaps Watch Dogs can come full circle in its promise to stand among the most interesting and improved IPs in the gaming industry. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Let me know what you think about the Watch Dogs franchise down below in the comments section. Do you also think it's a franchise that has made one of gaming's biggest turnarounds? Or do you think I'm completely out of my mind? Let me know down below. Have a great day, guys. See you next time. Peace. What was your favorite game from E3 2019? Keanu Reeves. What do you think about the upcoming Control? I'm looking forward to Control. I think that Quantum Break was a pretty underappreciated yet still flawed game. So I'm hoping that Control will be like the time that Remedy really finds all the pieces to put together, because I like the idea of being able to slow down time and all this kind of telekinesis stuff in an action game. So yeah, I'm rooting for Control for sure. Pineapple on pizza, what's your opinion? Did you just ask me if I like fruit on my pizza pie? You sick Mongoloid.